Hello and welcome to YouTube for you. So in this new tutorial series we'll be start working on this climb up functionality. As you guys can now see, my character properly climb on moving objects with proper hand location and everything is properly working fine. So let's get started, guys. So here is my default third-person character controller, and I'm gonna open my character blueprint, go to functions and create a new function. I'm gonna call this determine climb location, and in this function I'm gonna use sphere trace by channel. I'm gonna get my actor location, add 90 in my z-axis, and this will be my start location, and for my end location I'm gonna use my get actor rotation, grab the forward vector of my rotation, multiply the forward vector to 150 and add this to my start location. This is my start location and end location. So here is sphere trace by channel. I'm gonna set the radius to 5, and for draw debug type to set this to for duration for this, and I'm gonna use spacebar and call this function. Here you guys can now see my trace is working. So now let's get to the next functionality. So if my trace does hit something, I'm gonna break the hit result and use this sphere trace by channel again. The second sphere trace will be used for my z location to determine the z location. The first will be used for determining the x and y location. And for this I'm gonna, so let's promote this impact point to a local variable. I'm gonna call this forward trace hit, like so. I'm gonna grab my impact point, add 90 in z-axis, set this to my start location, and the end will be my subtract the minus 95 subtract the 95 in z-axis and set this to my end location. So here is the second sphere trace start and end location. I'm gonna set the radius to 6, and now let's check this. Here you can now see my two traces are properly working fine. And now from this I'm gonna make some room from here, grab the impact normal of my first sphere trace and make rotation from x-axis, and I'm gonna delta rotate to 180 in yaw, and I'm gonna set this to my promote this local variable. I'm gonna call this my climb rotation. And I'm gonna name this to my climb rotation. So this will be my climb rotation, and we need to find the climb location now. So here is my climb rotation. Now I'm gonna go ahead and break the hit result and use the initial overlap to check. So if my initial overlap is true, I'm gonna make a new variable and call this enable climb. So if my initial overlap is true, then enable climb will be false, and I'm gonna create a new output from my function. This will be my enable climbing. So if the initial overlap is true, then enable climb will be false. And after this, I'm going to use another branch. So if it does hit something, then we will find the location for this. So the trick is, for climb on moving objects, I'm gonna use a arrow component for this. I'm gonna call this climb spot and set the hidden in game to false. So let's say when my trace hits something, then I'm gonna attach this arrow to that object and use the location of my arrow and then the location of my animation to climb on moving objects. So we'll see in the coming parts. So now let's set up the remaining functionality. I'm gonna promote the hit component to a local variable. I'm gonna call this hit component like so. So for my climb location, I'm gonna make a new variable and call this climb location. This will be my vector. Set the climb location and I'm gonna make vector the x and y will be used from this first sphere trace, so that's why I have promoted this to a variable. I'm gonna grab my forward trace hit variable here is my forward trace hit variable, and I'm gonna subtract the climb rotation. Use my climb rotation, get forward vector, multiply the forward vector to 45 and subtract this from my forward trace hit variable like so. So if I use the direct forward trace hit variable, then the spot will be this. My character is totally overlapped to this object, and so that's why, for preventing this, I'm gonna subtract the offset so that our character doesn't overlap to the object. So that's why I have subtract this from my forward trace hit. So and now I'm gonna split this structure pin, and this will be my x and y. And for my z location, I'm gonna grab my impact point of second trace, subtract the 110 units in z axis, and I'm gonna split the struct pin, and this will be my z axis. So here you guys can now see this is my climb location and here is my climb rotation. You can obviously pause the video and copy the functionality. So now I'm gonna moving forward. So if that is true, then we can climb on objects. So then I'm gonna set the enable climb to true, like so. Enable climb to true. And now let's set the tricky part of this tutorial, that will be climb on moving objects. So I'm gonna grab my climb spot and I'm gonna attach component to component. So the target will be my climb spot, that will be our arrow component, and the parent will be our hit component, that we have promoted this to variable over here. So this is my climb spot. I'm gonna set the scale to keep world and location and rotation rules to keep relative. And after that I'm gonna grab my climb spot and set the world, location and rotation of my climb spot to climb location and climb rotation, like so. And after that I'm gonna use my output pin and return the enable climb, that will be true. So I'm gonna use this again. If our initial sphere trace doesn't hit something, then we're gonna enable climb and return false. So this is our determine climb location function. This will be our first sphere trace, this will be our second sphere trace, and this will be the main functionality for setting up the climb location and rotation. So you can pause the video and duplicate the functionality for yourself. So now let's check the functionality. Here you guys can now see my arrow location is attached to this object, and if I move, my arrow stays on place. So now we have this determine climb location function. What I'm gonna do is this, I'm gonna draw debug type to none, set this to none, and now let's make our animation modifier for extracting the animation data from our animation. So here is the animation that I'm gonna using. This is from Keyboard Movement AnimSet Pro, and it has the proper root motion animation. So here you guys can now see this is the animation without root motion, and if I enable the root motion, this is the result of my animation. So for this, now let's make our animation modifier. I'm gonna right click, create blueprint class, and I'm gonna search for animation modifier. And I'm gonna call this extract location, like so. So here we have the event graph. I'm gonna override on apply function, and I'm gonna promote the animation sequence to a variable. I'm gonna use the add curve node. The curve name will be my x axis. Curve type will be the float curve. Duplicate the node and set this to my y-axis. Duplicate the node again and set this to my z-axis. So here I have created these three x, y and z-axis curves. So now I'm gonna use the for loop, grab my animation sequence, get the number of frames, the last index will be my number of frames, and I'm gonna use the node that will be my get time at frame. Animation sequence will be this. The frame will be my index of for loop, and I'm gonna use add float curve key at each iteration. Set the animation sequence. Curve name will be my x-axis. Time will be my get time at frame node, and the value will be my, I'm gonna get the value from get bone pause for frame. Get bone pause for frame. Set the animation sequence. Set the bone name to root. That will be the name of your top bone of your, in my case this is the root bone. Set the root, and the frame will be my iteration number of my for loop, and set the extract root motion to true from here. Split the transform, split the location, and for x-axis I'm going to use this for my x-axis value. Duplicate the same nodes, and for this I'm gonna use my y-axis. Set this to my y. Time will be this. Similarly, as that we have set the x in case of x-axis, similarly we have set this for our remaining y and z axis, like so. Time will be this, and for z we will be using the z axis. So here is our animation modifier is properly working, is properly made. So now I'm gonna save and open my animation and go to Windows, animation data modifiers, and add modifier. Here is my extract location modifier. I'm gonna right click and apply modifier. So according to this, we have our proper x, y and z axis animation curves are extracted. So we will use these curves to climb on moving objects or climb on static objects. So this is the animation modifier part is complete. So now let's move ahead. So now I'm gonna browse my animation and create animation montage. So you just need to right click and create animation montage. Here I have already created the climb montage, like so. Now we will go to our character blueprint and set the remaining parts. I'm gonna use my event tick for this. Tick. Grab my character movement component and search for is falling. So if our character is falling, then we will call this function so that we can climb on objects while falling down without pressing the spacebar key. So if we are falling is true, determine climb location, and if this will be true, if this return true, then we will make another function custom event. I'm gonna call this execute climbing, like so. So if this is true, then we will call this execute climbing functionality, like so. So in my execute climb functionality, first we will need a boolean variable that will be used for disable our movement, disable movement, and by default this will be false. And over in my axis movement, move forward, move right, I'm gonna use this variable to disabling my input when our character is climbing on objects. So if this is false, then we will add movement input. Similarly in case of move right, if this is false, then we will move to add movement input, like so. So when this climb location returns true, then we will call the execute climbing functionality, and when this functionality fires, we will first set the disable climb movement to true, and then we will set the stop movement immediately for our character movement component, like so. And I'm gonna grab my character movement again and set movement mode to flying. Set movement mode to flying and use set timer by event node. So the event will be our custom event. I'm gonna use the climb being set this, call this climbing, and the time will be our get world delta seconds. And for looping, I'm gonna set this to true. And after that, we will set our actor rotation. Set actor rotation. That will be our climb spot get world rotation. Grab our climb spot, that is the arrow, and get the world rotation and set that to our set actor rotation. And after that, we will grab our mesh and play montage, like so. And the montage will be our climb up montage. So now let's check this. Nothing is working, so you need to go to mesh, go to your animation graph and set the default slot here. And now we will see why our montage is not playing. I'm gonna check another time. Oh, we need to call this jump functionality when we press spacebar. We need to call jump. So this functionality is only fires when our character is falling, like so. Here you can now see my character is properly playing the montage. Now let's move ahead and set up the remaining functionality. And here we have our set timer by event. So when the montage is playing, we at event tick we will set the rotation, set the climb location of our character using our animation curves and climb spot location. So from here custom event, I'm gonna set the actor location and rotation, like so. For location, I'm gonna grab my climb spot, get world location, and add world location to my. So from our climb spot get world location, we will need our animation curves, and for this I'm gonna grab my mesh, get anim instance, and call the get curve value. So in my animation, here you guys can now see, if I disable my root motion and select my route. You guys can now see my character is moving forward, and the forward is y-axis when my character moves forward, not in z and not in x, like so. So I will use the y-axis for this. I'm gonna get curve value of my y-axis and get my actor rotation, forward vector, multiply the forward vector to our get curve value, like so. And I'm gonna break the result, and this will be our x and y, and for our z I'm gonna get curve value of our z-axis. This is our z-axis. And for rotation I'm gonna grab my climb spot, set world location, get world location, set this over here, like so. So you can pause the video and set the functionality like so. So now I can check this. Great. So here you guys can now see my character is properly climbing on moving and static objects. Voila. So now let's set up the remaining few things. So if I on my play montage on completed, I'm gonna set the disable movement to true, to false, sorry, set the disable movement to false. And over in my climb montage I'm gonna make animation notifier when our character is properly climb up. So at this point our character is stands on the obstacle, so I'm gonna right click and add notifier, and the notifier will be climb complete, like so. So when our character reaches at this point, the climb complete notifier will fire, and I'm gonna use the climb complete notifier from here. Try get pawn owner and cast to our third person character, like so. So in our third person character we will create a new function that will be our climbing complete, and from our climb complete I'm gonna set the movement mode to back into walking, like so. So in my animation blueprint I'm gonna call this function climbing complete. So when our character reaches at this point, our this animation notifier will fire and climb complete functionality is fires. So now let's check this functionality. This is not working properly. Let me see the issue. So I'm gonna print if this our fires or not. Okay, this is firing. There is something wrong on other end. Okay, wait. So here is our timer that we have used. Set timer by event. I'm gonna promote the timer to a variable. I'm gonna call this climb timer. Like so. So when our climbing is complete, I'm gonna grab my climb timer and invalidate, clear and invalidate the timer so that our this set actor location and rotation functionality no longer calls. Now you can see my character is properly climbing on moving objects and also on static objects. So this is the result. So I hope you guys like this tutorial. So don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel, and one more thing, you can also grab the project files from my Patreon page where you can access all the project files and communicate me over there. So I hope you guys like this video, and I will see you in the next video.